Good morning, everybody. The time is 9:31 a.m. Today is Thursday, April 27th, 2023. Welcome to Emeraldville City Hall. We're located at 1333 Park Avenue in the Civic Center. You can also participate via Zoom. The link for the Zoom meeting is provided for in today's agenda, as well as by phone. If you're joining us by Zoom or by phone, you can use the raise hand feature on Zoom or press star and 9 by phone. And when we call for public comment opportunities, you can raise your hand for public comment. I'll begin by asking if the clerk of the board would please take the roll.
Director Hardy? Here. Director Miley? Director Vela? Director Winra? Present. Director Gallo?
Present.
Director Bowers?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum?
Thank you, Lydia. Now is the time for public comment. A member of the public wishing to comment for an item not on today's agenda has 2 minutes to do so. I see no members of the public present. Do we have anyone online wishing to speak?
No.
And we have any written comments?
No.
Okay, public comment is now closed. I'll turn to the consent calendar. We have one consent item today. It's the meeting minutes of March 23rd, 2023. Are there any changes being proposed to the minutes? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the minutes?
No public comment?
Public comments closed. Is there a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Wingraf, second by Guy to approve minutes. Please call the roll.
Director Hardy?
Pardon me?
Do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Hardy, aye. Director Miley? Miley absent. Director Vela? Vela absent. Director Winra?
Aye.
Winra, aye. Director Gallo?
Aye.
Gallo, aye. Director Bowers?
Aye.
Bowers, aye.
Okay, the motion passes. The item is approved. Director's report, item 4, Director Brooks.
Good morning, directors. It's so good to see you all after, almost 3 years not being in person. Just for the public's knowledge, these meetings are recorded and can be found at the Alameda County Healthy Homes Department website. That's at achhd.org.
Hold that microphone up a little bit so we get you in the recording. Go ahead, bend that goose neck up towards you.
That better?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, if anyone wants to watch the recording of this meeting at a later date, they can go to achhd.org and go to our website, which this slide here shows a picture of the JPA members and some bios on all of you. Next slide, please. Here we go. So we just missed Earth Day. It was on April 22nd. However, because this is the Healthy Homes Department and part of the principles of healthy housing is to be green, you'll see that I kind of formatted these slide presentations with green backgrounds in order to recognize the importance of saving our planet. Next slide. Along those same lines, in terms of saving our planet, that to me requires us building up partnerships even with people that you might think would not partner with us. We, over the last several months, have been working very closely with the California Apartment Association and the Rental Housing Association of Southern Alameda County, partnering with them on actually doing some education and awareness of child-led poisoning prevention, as well as explaining to them the various services that Alameda County Healthy Homes Department can provide to rental housing providers. And in that regard, they too are starting to hold in-person meetings again, and our outreach education engagement team has been going to some of those meetings. I know many of the directors here are familiar with Sony Johnson. I know just last week she was at one of the meetings for the Rental Housing Association for Southern Alameda County. But we've been building some really good collaboration with them as we come out of the pandemic. I think we all recognize the need to work with the rental housing providers on ways to protect the tenants within their homes. Next slide, please. This slide, Director Gallo, I'm going to direct this one at you. I'm so proud of what Oakland just recently did. A lot of people ask questions about, what is Oakland doing with the lead settlement money, and I always respond, I don't know, you really need to talk to Oakland. But I do know a lot about what Oakland is doing for lead poisoning prevention. And one of the things they just recently did was they adopted an ordinance. And I'm just going to read a little bit of what it says. Ordinance amending the Oakland Building Maintenance Code, Oakland Municipal Code to conform to the 2022 California Building Standards, established lead hazard abatement standards. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight, amongst all the whereases, one of the things that jumped out at me was, it says here, whereas the racial equity impact analysis entitled Eliminating Lead Paint Hazards in Oakland and Alameda County, published by the Department of Race and Equity in September of 2021, recommends that Oakland create a robust enforcement program for lead-based hazards. And I won't read through the rest. I just want to point out here in this slide, it talks about the fact that they are now requiring people to get permits when they are going to do renovation, repair, remodeling work on pre-1978 housing. And I've been sharing this now across the nation just this week at the steering committee for the National Center for Healthy Housing, describing this and recommending it as a model that all cities and counties should try to adopt if they're serious about lead poisoning prevention. I've also shared the Race and Equity Impact Analysis Report, which I know the JPA was able to see a presentation by representatives from Oakland back in 2021. I remember when the Assistant City Administrator, LaTonda Simmons, was telling me back in 2020 that they were going to do this, and I was like, oh, this is going to take a lot out of all of us to get it done, but she kept saying, if you work with us on this, you're going to really end up liking the finished product. And I have to admit, she was absolutely right. I mean, the report is now being distributed amongst many of my colleagues in healthy housing and child lead poisoning prevention, because again, it is a way to tell the story in order to bring to light the need to address lead poisoning, particularly in communities of low income and people of color. So just as proud as I could possibly be in terms of what Oakland is doing for lead poisoning prevention. As I said, with the lead settlement dollars, I am not quite in the loop with what's going on with that. Hope to get in the loop. I know Director Gallo has plans for that. But as I said again, they are doing things in spite of what you might hear in the media. Next slide. On a related note, the Environmental Protection Agency Region 9, which is the Pacific Southwest region, contacted us and said that they would like to have us select some communities in order to do some community engagement with regards to lead poisoning prevention. They actually wanted us to try to pick some communities throughout California to do this pilot program. We suggested to them that they let us focus it more on Alameda County instead, because it was going to be a bit challenging to try to do something like this statewide with the limited dollars that they were going to offer us to do these, what they call Lead 101 trainings. Next slide. So in regards to how did we get there in terms of the EPA asking us to select for the state of California some communities in order to do a pilot program. And I get to proudly blame all of you for that. We have developed a very good partnership with the EPA over the years, and it has a lot to do with the initiatives that this JPA has directed us to do. Beginning with the EPA asking us to see if jurisdictions would require that when someone applies for a building permit, that they hire someone who's gone through the one-day lead safe work practices training, also known as renovation, repair, painting. And we reached out to you, and the cities within the JPA agreed to have language added to building permit applications that said that if someone is going to work on a pre-78 house, that they or whoever they hire will be RP certified. In fact, Emeryville went a step further and was the first that I'm aware of to actually require not simply an acknowledgement on the permit application, but a verification on the building permit application. And that thrilled the EPA because that was like the ideal, which we could not get many cities to do. And in this slide, you can see some of those examples of the language that was adopted by some of the JPA cities. Emeryville's verification form is there. And again, in terms of modeling for the rest of the nation, again, the EPA has been sharing that with the other EPA regions, saying this is something you should be trying to do. The other thing that JPA has moved us in the direction is to provide trainings, and you see a picture up there of David Crosby. Actually, he's a member of our staff. He is an EPA certified trainer, and we put on some trainings for city building inspection and code enforcement officers. I believe we started with Berkeley, and then we ended up in Oakland and then Emeryville on some of those trainings. And I know Emeryville has been a hub for some of the trainings that we've been putting on for property owners. So again, the EPA was taking note of that. And that was one of the reasons why, if you go to this next slide, you will see pretty much what the Lead Poisoning Prevention 101 is all about. Basically, this started within the tribal communities. The EPA was trying to put together some type of toolkit that community leaders could use to go into their neighborhoods and teach lead poisoning prevention. It proved so successful that the EPA decided, well, let's not just do this in tribal communities, let's take this thing nationwide. So, of course, Region 9, again, with this history of the work that you all have had us doing with regards to working with the EPA on RP, the Region 9 was selected to be the pilot area for this pilot project. And that's when they reached out to Alameda County and said, okay, can you guys pull this together for us? One other thing, next slide here. In terms of the trainings that we have been doing with the code enforcement officers and building inspectors, they also have indicated they're going to give us some funding to do more trainings. And so we will be looking, in particular at City of Oakland, to prioritize trainings of their combo inspectors, the building inspectors / code enforcement officers, because we recognize in light of those new ordinances that I previously mentioned being adopted, that there's going to be more of a demand on their building inspectors to be able to address lead hazards and unsafe work practices. But all of the JPA cities will be invited over the next few months to have their building inspectors and code enforcement officers go through that training. I'm aware of Emeryville is hiring a new code enforcement officer.
They're on staff.
All right. I will make sure that that person, if they are not already EPA certified in lead safe work practices, that they attend one of those trainings. Again, we were selected as a pilot back in 2018 to do presentations, trainings for code enforcement officers as a pilot, and it ended up being so successful that EPA HQ in Washington, D.C. Has established it as a standard of practice, and they're encouraging all of the EPA regions now to make money available to jurisdictions to put on RP trainings. Next slide. On a related note, Senator Archuleta, who, as you know, last year was able to champion Senate Bill 1076, which that bill allows California to become the 15th state in the union to take over the enforcement of the EPA renovation, repair, painting rule, has decided to champion with the code enforcement again in resurrecting the health and safety code that makes reference to code enforcement incentive grants. We believe that this is a critical time for code enforcement because of Assembly Bill 838 that you are all aware of, the bill that became law last summer that requires all cities and counties to not just respond to substandard housing complaints, but they also must respond to complaints about lead hazards and unsafe work practices. And so a lot of jurisdictions in the state of California are saying that they don't have the bandwidth for their code enforcement officers to take on all of these new mandates. And so under Senate Bill 356, Code Enforcement Incentive Grant, if it were to pass, it would make money available for some jurisdictions to apply and receive some of those grant funding. This is going to be challenging because we keep hearing that there is a huge state deficit. And so coming forward with legislation that includes an appropriation is something that it will be difficult. But last week, the Senate bill, or the Senate Housing Committee did vote for the bill, and they moved it on to the Appropriations Committee. It's my understanding that when it goes to the Appropriations Committee next week, that it will be put in the suspense file. Because it is a bill that is asking for money. And the way that is explained to me is that all those bills go into the suspense file, which gives you an opportunity to begin to lobby to get the bill out of suspense file. And that takes place on May 18th. And so that gives the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers time to try to rally the troops, so to speak, to reach out to all their elected officials and ask them to sign on to support the bill. Otherwise, on May 18th, the Appropriations Committee could vote to leave it in the suspense file, at which point then the bill dies. And that would be heartbreaking because I was a recipient of the Code Enforcement Incentive Grant 20 years ago and was able to do some really good work that my county otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. And it's unfortunate that because of the recession, they stopped doing the Code Enforcement Incentive Grant, but because it's still in the Health and Safety Code, it really would be easy for the legislature to simply resurrect it. But again, I'm being told because this is a deficit year, it may be difficult, but we've already gotten the support of the California State Association of Counties, the California League of Cities, and a number of other associations are signing on in support. And so I'm hoping that will build the momentum to get it out of the suspense file. But I would ask that the JPA also consider writing letters of support as a JPA, and also talking to your cities about maybe signing on in support of that bill. Next slide. Another ask of the JPA. We are applying for a HUD lead hazard control grant, $5 million to do lead remediation work, to do outreach and education. And there is some word that I'm hearing out of Washington, D.C. that that grant might also be able to use it to actually support some code enforcement work in terms of code enforcement training for renovation, repair, painting, lead safe work practices. So that $5 million over 4 years, we are going to be submitting that application in the next couple of weeks, and we would like the JPA to sign a letter of support for that as well. One last slide here, which is more of just simply an announcement. A couple of weeks ago, the Community Development Agency, as part of the County Board of Supervisors budget hearings, presented their agency budget, which also included the Healthy Homes Department budget. And so next month, we would like to come to the JPA and present the budget as well as our goals and objectives. And with that, that completes my report. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Before questions, we'll turn to public comment. Are there members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
No comment.
Okay, public comment is closed. Are there questions or comments from directors on this item? I have a couple. On SB 356, we already sent a letter as a board, correct, or did we not yet?
No, I don't believe
No,
that.
because I know we discussed it at the meeting, Dale was that, but did we not, we didn't take any action on that one?
No.
Okay, and do you, for the price and appropriations, what is the dollar amount?
18 million.
Okay, so it's gonna definitely get a haircut, that bill's gonna have some challenges. Okay, and then the lead hazard control grant, the deadline for that application is when?
It was extended to June 14th, I believe.
Okay, June 14th. And we've previously applied for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this is both information and action item members. I'd like to make a motion to, we do it as one motion unless anyone objects. I'd like to make a motion that the board, submit a letter of support for Senate Bill 356. And I'd also, in that motion, like to, recommend that the board, authorize the chair to sign a letter of support in support of the agency's, lead hazard control grant request of $5 million.
Second.
Okay, is there further discussion on that request, Director Bell?
I just had a question in terms of the funding stream for SB 356. Is that just state general funds or is that the request?
Yes, state general fund.
I guess my question, and this is, I'm of course going to support the letter, but is there any other, there's no other funds that we think we can ask, any no other special fund requests or lawsuit funds or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
State.
Yeah, and discussing it with Senator Archuleta, it seems that his belief was the general fund was the fund to go to. But I mean, there's time to make amendments to the bill. It's my understanding there's already been some amendments submitted that the Senator has accepted.
You want to continue? So Director Bell and I work in this space full time, so we're looking at each other because we know what we're both thinking. I'll let you go first.
No, I think that just in you know, with the LAO's outlook and with the expectations for, you know, even an update to the LAO projections, I think my concern is just if it's coming out of state general funds, that essentially it's not gonna happen, which concerns me. And so I'm just wondering if there's, you know, we found some other places where there might be some special funds or residual lawsuit funds or something that could be redirected specifically into this. And so, you know, it might be worth kind of contemplating what those other options could be. And then also if it's, anyway, so that's all. And I deal with this in the school space, so.
Yeah, and I deal with it in the healthcare space, and I would just say that everything she said is correct. It seems highly unlikely that this bill will make it out of appropriations. So when it sits on suspense file, they collect all the bills with appropriations, and then there's essentially a behind-the-scenes conversation between political leadership in the parties and with the other house, and they decide which bills to pass. It's more of a political committee in California than it is a actual financial committee. They just kind of determine preemptively how much money they have to spend, and as was mentioned, due to the LAO's forecast of multiple billions of dollars of anticipated shortfall in revenue projections this year for California, it's highly unlikely that they're going to create new funding for a new program when they're going to be telling their existing programs they're going to be getting cut. So it seems like a highly unlikely event to have the bill pass out of appropriations. That being said, as was recommended, the safest way to do that is to touch or to tap into a non-general fund revenue stream or a source of revenue in order to fund it. And as was mentioned, there are, I can't even tell you, working for years now with the Department of Finance, there's thousands of funds in California that exist that have been created over the years that just have pots of money sitting in designated fund accounts in the state budget that they just sit there, they're untapped, they're unused. And I would really strongly suggest looking for that the senator look for a nexus between one of those unused or underused funds and this bill to see if that he can convince the Department of Finance to use a special fund instead. Yeah, very well.
And I would also say that it might be helpful if we could schedule a meeting, for instance, with Senator Skinner's office or somebody who works in budgets to see if there's some sort of underutilized fund stream that's available where there might have been residuals from this year. Even if it doesn't add up to the 18 million, if we could at least get something in there so that it is funded, at least in the short term.
You bring up a good point, because the way the bill is presented, there's no dollar amount, but then there's a separate budget ask letter that's being signed by a number of legislators where they, I believe it's addressed to Skinner, and it does ask for specifically 18 million. The other thing that makes sense to me is the way we presented this at the Senate Housing Committee hearing was that we know that there is a deficit. We also know that there is a housing crisis. We know that the legislature wants to prioritize funding to build more affordable housing. And we're saying that these code enforcement grants will help preserve existing affordable housing. So maybe there is the nexus. If there's some money that is supposed to be designated towards building more affordable housing, maybe that same fund could be used for efforts to preserve existing housing.
That's an example of what could be done. I would actually suggest that federal funding that's related to the the Inflation Reduction Act that is earmarked for climate and environmental purposes. States received multiple hundreds of millions of dollars in our case of that funding. Some of it has been programmed, but not all of it has been programmed. It's a specially designated fund with its own timeline on it. It's not subject to general fund expenditure rules, so it is eligible to be programmed for that if the state wanted to do that. And the reason there's a separate budget letter, as you noted, the bill probably currently says to create, this state-controlled, program essentially. They can pass it in law, and they can literally add appropriations. It's possible that they do pass the bill, but they add a provision that says the bill does not take effect until an appropriation has been made by the state, which means that it's just a law on the books. It doesn't do anything until money is put into it to actually fund it. Alternatively, there has been a practice of not doing that recently, having a bunch of dead laws laying around in the books. So it's more likely that they just don't pass it if they don't have a funding stream. And as it relates to budget letters and budget asks, lots of legislators make lots of asks, and then they get basically narrowed down into what is your top ask, or what is your top couple asks. And that's again a political issue. Who's most favored with leadership gets to make bigger asks and more asks, and who's not doesn't. And so Senator Skinner, as budget chair, does have a good deal of control, and I agree with Director Bell, she's the right person, and her office is the right one to talk to about what could be done. That they're going to be very budget savvy about what finance is available, what funding streams are available to be used for something like this. And I think if they were approached in a productive manner and said, listen, we want to do this, is there, I personally think it's probably federal earmark money, but if there's federal money that comes to the state that can be allocated to this, that's much more likely to get this bill passed and funded and actually avoid the entire negotiation in June on the budget, because it won't be a general fund allocation. If it's a general fund allocation, even if it gets out of appropriations, it's going to get destroyed in the budget conference committee.
Excellent point. Two questions. Would the JPA directors be interested in seeing that budget letter that's being circulated now?
Sure.
Okay, I can send that to you.
What's the other question? Okay, go ahead, Director Bell.
I just want to stress the timeline on this. I think this needs to happen fairly quickly because the May revise is getting finalized, which the governor's then going to put out. Agencies will have essentially 24 hours, maybe 12 hours to kind of raise flags and comments. And at that point, a majority of the funds will have been kind of allocated, and then it'll go to the budget conference, which happens fairly quickly. And it's a question of whether or not, how public that conference is going to be. In the last couple of years, it has not been a public conference. So I think we need to move on kind of an expedited timeline. I'm fine signing on to the letter or voting to sign on to the letter, but I do think that we should put in a request pretty quickly and send the letter to Senator Skinner's office with a request to even for a 15-minute meeting on paths forward.
Yeah, she's 100% correct on all of that. It goes, for years, my job was to basically live in a hotel across the street from the Capitol building for 45 days as people made decisions literally on the hour, 2 in the morning. The committees went till 2 in the morning sometimes just to approve stuff. And as was mentioned, it's not as publicly transparent, but a lot of stuff moves behind the scenes. It's $300 billion of economy going through the process in less than 30 days, essentially. And so it'll be swept under the rug. What I learned is that if you don't sit at the table the entire time, your food gets eaten by someone else. So That's pretty much how it will go. So you're serious, and the senator is really, it's the senator's bill, so if the senator is serious about this, it needs to have conversation, it needs to have a plan when the revise comes out with revised forecast for revenue. They're gonna need to pivot very quickly as to how much money they actually can get by with, and then where they're gonna get it from, because everybody will be competing, and I guarantee this is not probably the strongest alliance of people seeking money among all the people who go after money in Sacramento.
Thank you, Director. Now I have two questions.
Okay.
I thought I had just one. In terms of the JPA's letter to Senator Archuleta supporting the bill, would you include that language recommending?
I would not do that. I would simply support it to show support, and then you would, because it looks like you're one-upping the senator if you put it all in a letter. You would just support the bill and support the purpose of it. This is why it would be good, and we have a conversation offline with the senator or the budget chair about why, what we think needs to happen on the funding, but we just have a general support letter. Would you agree with me? Yeah, I should agree.
And then one last question, in terms of the history of this bill, it was originally adopted in the Health and Safety Code back in 2000 by, I hope I'm getting it right, it was Assembly member or Senator Lowenthal, who went on to become a congressperson.
Yeah.
And the bill became law, and as you mentioned, sometimes you have bills that sit there and or they become law, and then there's never any funding appropriated to go with it. Back in 2000, I think it was $5 million was set aside for it. And as I said, I was a code enforcement manager in Sacramento County at the time, and I applied for it and was able to utilize it. And then 3 years ago, I brought it to the attention of the Code Enforcement Association because everybody forgot that the law existed, including State Housing Community Development that administered the bill. And so we've spent the last few years talking with HCD about resurrecting it, and then this year we finally were able to get Senator Archuleta to champion it. So it's already a law, and the question here is, would it be wise, rather than asking for 18 mil, asking for much less just in order to reestablish it with, as you said, in future years when the budget improves, then maybe more money could be set aside for it?
That's a very insightful question. I would defer answering that question only because I don't know how much money is actually needed. Like, I don't know, like, you do the technical details of it to know how much money would be needed to make the program worthwhile, and it's the senator's bill, so the senator has to kind of decide how much they want to go for. Because you know, the more you ask, I've made many budget asks, I've had many successful budget asks, and I've had many calls from the budget chair's staff, you know, the day before budget is approved, saying, you asked for 12 million, we'll give you 9.1, yes or no. And you have to decide if you're going to take, if you're going to make it work on 9 million instead of 12 million. So, you know, I do think that's a decision that, you know, if the supporters of the bill think it would be worthwhile and more, if it could get off the ground with 5 million, then yeah, that needs to be communicated by the senator, not by us, but by the senator to the budget chair. Yeah, the senator needs to make that decision. We should not go out saying that. We should tell the senator that. Yeah.
Well, just so the JPA knows, if the bill is passed for any amount of money, it would be a competitive grant process, and I would be encouraging cities within the JPA to apply for it, if for no other reason, to pilot a proactive rental inspection program that would include inspecting units for lead hazards.
Great. Is there further discussion or debate on the motion? There's a motion by Bowers and a second by Wengraff to send a letter of support for SB 356 and to send a letter of support for a $5 million lead hazard control grant application from the JPA. Please call the roll.
Director Hardy? Director Hardy, aye. Director Miley? Miley absent. Director Vela?
Aye.
Vela, aye. Director Winruff?
Aye.
Winruff, aye. Director Gallo?
Aye.
Gallo, aye. Director Bowers?
Aye.
Bowers, aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. The recommended actions are approved. Item 5 is the monthly report. What do you say?
Just want to point out two things. As you can see, we continue to promote the DIY paint supply kits. This is a service or product that are available to CSA property owners in your cities. It's like an estimated value of $25, which, consists of like a 5-gallon bucket, and inside we have like basic painting supplies. So anybody that's interested, have them call the 567-8280 number or visit our website at hchd.gov. And also in the month of March, we launched the in-home consultation service. Again, this is a service that's available to CSA property owners, and this is a free property-based lead safety consultation. And so we'll be sending you the flyers, and we also have an announcement on our website. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members who have questions or comments? Is there public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Public comments closed. There's no action on the monthly report. Item 6 is future agenda items. Is there any member here who wishes to request a future agenda item for the JPA's board meetings? Okay, seeing none. Number 7 is announcements by the board of directors. Any here wishes to make an announcement? Director Winograd?
Yeah, unless we
Push
can,
the button on here nicely. There you go.
unless we can figure out a way for me to participate remotely, I will be missing the main meeting.
Okay. Is there anyone else who will be missing the main meeting or not available? Okay, so we'll be missing the main meeting. All right, any other announcements by members of the board? I would just say that today is going to be the warmest day we've had in 6 months, and so I would just highly recommend you get outside, get some fresh air. A little sun never hurt. Pre-cool planning, as I say. And I hope everybody has a lovely end to Women's Month. No, sorry, that was last month. That's terrible of me. This month is Second Chances Month. Every month, you know what, you were right, every month is Women's Month, and if it isn't, it should stop being. Yeah. So enjoy Women's Month 2.0 and Second Chances Month. Make sure that you're kind to your neighbors, and remember that there are people in our communities who have made mistakes, but it would be a mistake for us to not welcome them back. All right, with that, the time is 10:09. We're adjourned.